Welcome to Educators Not Robots, a podcast that humanizes the educational experience. Today we are introducing you to Mr. Stefan Torres-Esquer, also known as Mr. Stefan. Mr. Stefan is a special education specialist, public speaker, content creator, curriculum developer, and founder of the community group The Direction Ability Advocates. His tagline is taking the dis out of disability, and he is determined to change the way that people perceive different. Mr. Stefan attended San Joaquin Delta College before transferring to San Francisco State University, where he eventually earned his Master of Arts in Special Education and a Deaf-Blind Specialization Certificate. He won Bay Area Educator of the Year for 2018-2019 and has worked as a special education consultant for Stanford University and the California World Languages Project. Most impressively, Mr. Stefan has only been teaching for 6 years. He started his teaching career in San Francisco at the Thomas Edison Charter Academy and eventually transitioned to Lowell High School. Upon coming back to Stockton, he spent 1 year at Edison High School, and now he is currently teaching daily living and vocational skills in the young adult program for students between the ages of 18 to 22 with moderate to severe disabilities. He just launched his brand new project, the Ability Academy Click and Go distance learning program. This is an interactive online program for special education students and teachers. It is free and super easy to use. And the best part is that all you need to do is literally click and go. If you're interested in following Mr. Stefan as he continues his journey, you can find him on social media, on Instagram at Mr. Stefan Online, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Mr. Stefan Online. You can also visit his website at www.mrstefanonline.com. Here we are, Mr. Stefan. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. I'm so excited. This is such a cool project. I'm super inspired by you.
Thank you.
I think this is really, really, really cool. And you know, we live in an area where innovative projects and creativity, it just doesn't happen enough. So I very much admire what you're doing, and I'm so excited.
And I've been admiring you from afar. So for people listening, we're actually cousins, and we don't get to interact very often. And you've been working in San Francisco up until this last year. So I know I've seen you online with your students in San Francisco, all of the work you've been doing, the advocacy. I think you even took them out to like some civic like activities. Like
so we do it all.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my favorite projects is we're called the Direction Ability Advocates. And so that's definitely something that is so much fun for me, because it involves a lot of the work that I do is me by myself. I go speak places or whatever, but I love working with the Ability Advocates because it's all teens and young adults with disabilities who are standing up and advocating for change and just showing off what they're capable of. And so I'm not one for anything that's boring. And we did summer tours. We were at all the major festivals in San Francisco on the main stage. I mean, it was crazy. It was so much fun. And so I'm hoping that I can do similar stuff here in Stockton now that I'm back.
We need it here in Stockton, like you said. I think not to be like salty about it, but I feel like big cities like San Francisco, they get a lot of people like you working and doing that kind of work. But out here in Stockton and San Joaquin County, we don't get a lot of people trying to do stuff like that. So it's really cool that you came back to the Valley to bring that work here, especially for our special needs students out here. They really need it. I think the most, probably more so.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited. And it's so funny because I was just thinking about it before we logged on is, like she said, we are cousins. And you were saying you have been admiring me from afar. And it's so funny. I remember being a kid and I would watch you like walking to the bus or something. And I used to just always think that you were the coolest person in the world. And I also was like just so shy and weird that I just didn't even so I would just get quiet whenever you were around. But I thought you were so cool.
I didn't even know that.
I still think you're so cool.
I felt like we were both super shy because I was super shy too. And so I just kind of, when I was thinking about it leading up to this week, I was like, we were just both super shy, quiet kids. Like there was no way we were going to talk to each other if someone didn't start the conversation.
Yeah.
But your family, like your mom and your aunts and uncles and your grandma and your grandpa, they've always were like so warm with me because, you know, I was married into the family with when my dad married my stepmom. So they were just super welcoming. Like as soon as my parents were married, they're like, "Prima, like, you know, you're one of us now." So like that was always super cool. I think your whole family, the Torreses, are just always so cool to me too. And
thank you. Yeah, you know, I never ever thought of you as anything but a cousin. Like you know, no one ever talked about it that way. It was always just like, that's your cousin.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, it wasn't until I was older when I really was like, oh, okay, you know,
yeah,
she was married in, but you've just always been our cousin.
Yeah, I love that.
You guys are really cute.
Are you feeling left out?
I kind of want to talk about me now. But not really. I actually really do want to talk about you because I'm going to be honest. I only knew of you as a teacher. I had no idea that your thing was working with students with disabilities. I had no idea that you were so involved in that movement. And so I've been doing research. I have not been stalking you. I've been researching you very thoroughly for several hours a day.
It's okay, you can stalk me.
And I was watching every YouTube video I could find, and I was just amazed at just all the things you've been doing and creating and really trying to get the word out. Had no idea. I mean, it was very educational, the stuff that you're putting out there. I just think it's important that you know, we help you with that today. Like if you have some stuff you're working on currently that you kind of want to spread the word about, or if there's anything that's currently on your mind, do like recent things going on in that arena that you want to talk about, you know, please use the time to engage in this conversation, and we'll
promote it.
Yeah, we'll
let's
explore that. Let's look into that a little bit.
I think our whole thing with the podcast is, you know, over the summer with everything that happened, it really drilled home to me about how underappreciated educators are. And we see it, especially with COVID. I feel like, you know, we've been complaining about this for years, but we're treated like glorified babysitters, and that's not what we do. Yeah. You know, we're not there to entertain the kids, although entertaining them helps them pay attention. But that's not what our number one priority. And I think that what it drives for me, and what we talk about, me and my husband, is that people just don't know what educators do and why we do it. And like that we're your neighbors. Like we're the people, like, you know, when we go home, like your kids living at your house are our neighbors too. And, you know, and I think especially for special education, that's such an unknown area of education. Even for me as a general education teacher, I rely so heavily on our SPED department to help me when I have a SPED student or a 504 in my class. I'm like, what do I do? I don't know. It's not working. I tried. And then they're always the ones who are like, did you try this? Did you try that? Like, you know, so I think that you're going to have a lot to share, that people need to know this, like teach other teachers like me who are general ed, and then just other members of the community that this is part of our job too, is we get kids that have some really difficult problems that they were either born with or that were somehow imposed on them in life. And teaching them is very different than what we consider the average kid.
So why don't you tell us more about your involvement with that? Like, how did it all get started?
Yeah, what made you go into SPED? SPED is so hard.
Yeah. You know, that's probably the number one question that I get. I think any special educator, because it is a rough field to be in. And I think, you know, most people just would never do it. And so everybody's like, why, you know, what made you choose special education? You know, and I think some people have like really personal stories, like a brother with autism or, you know, a cousin with Down syndrome. And I don't really have that, you know, but ever since I was young, I always knew that I wanted to help people. And I didn't want to help just anybody. You know, I wanted to help the people who were the most underserved and underrepresented. I'm down for the underdog for sure, 100%.
So,
and I think, yeah.
I mean, it's actually a really good. I have a question there, because when you were growing up, was it the case for you that special education was segregated basically from the main population of your school? Because I know that was the case for me. So I didn't really even see those classrooms, and I didn't really, I wouldn't have much of an awareness of them at all. Did you have an awareness of that back even when you were younger?
No, I remember when I was in the 8th grade for that 1 year, we had one student who was sort of being included in our program, and that was the first time I ever really saw any type of inclusion or mainstreaming. But there was I don't feel like there was a lot done to really truly include him. So I mean, I knew he was there, but he had an aide who was like sitting right by him the whole time, and they kind of just interacted with each other. And then when I got to high school, I remember him because I would see him at high school. He went to the same high school as I did, but there was, it was very segregated. So I would see him around, but we were no longer interacting. But, for whatever reason, I always, I always knew he was there. I always noticed him sort of being there, but, it was just segregated again. And it still is in a lot of different places. It's not a very inclusive world even today. Even some of the jobs that I've had and even some of the places that I've been recently are, it's very far from where it needs to be. And students are still very much separate and very much unwanted in 2020. So
absolutely.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I remember one time I was at an Inclusivity Institute last summer, and we were talking about the different oppressed groups. And we talked about how the disability group as an oppressed group is the invisible group. Like it's the one that like people, we have more people with disabilities than any other minority group. And it's the one people don't think about at all. And
we're always left out.
Yeah. And then with schools doing this, where there's still this separation, they get put in their own program, their own class. You're just maintaining that invisibility. And that's causing the problems that we have. They're not being accepted because they're not being allowed to enter into the community starting in childhood. And like, to really think about that, that's really terrible. We're excluding them from the moment they start school.
I mean, especially in cases where it's very obvious that it's not necessary to leave them out of the class, to be excluding them. And one of the things that I learned from one of your YouTube videos was 13 or 14 different types of disabilities. Yes, categorized by the California Department of Education or something.
So the IDEA, which is the basically it's the laws that protect people with disabilities in America, and so you can qualify if you have any of those 13 disabilities. But I definitely think what you're saying is so accurate. Is even when we start having these conversations about diversity on different campuses or different districts, and we're talking about prejudice and we're talking about oppression, people with disabilities are so often left out of those conversations. And I do appreciate and I do honor the fact that so many other groups also need support and they need change and they need, for things to be different. And, we're in the midst of all the Black Lives Matter stuff, and all of that is important. Right. But, the people with disabilities are the group that really it's still acceptable to treat them almost in a 1960s kind of way still today in 2020. So it is important for, and I do a lot of advocacy, and I've had a couple of run-ins just through the years where people feel like what I'm trying to say is that, no one else needs to be complaining because people with disabilities have it the worst. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we just want to be part of the conversation.
So they're all lives mattering you.
Yeah.
That's not even a valid argument. Yeah, with that IDEA stuff, I had no clue about that. I knew about like the No Child Left Behind, and I was familiar kind of sort of how that has influenced what's going on in classrooms as far as like students being more just having more inclusive classrooms. But that it really opened my eyes to like the level of responsibility that classrooms and schools are starting to have for providing inclusive education and really meeting the needs of students. And I was like, this stuff is, I mean, you're literally at the cusp of this movement. Like this stuff is just kicking off. And you're right. For the most part, people aren't aware. People don't know what's going on. And I think what you're doing is like, you're going to be one of those voices that gets people in the, that enlightens the future. You're really doing that right now.
Thank you. I hope so.
It is, man. I'm telling you. TikTok. You're on YouTube.
That's one of the reasons why I do things the way that I do. I had a really rough time in college because my professors, just they weren't able to see sort of my vision or why I act the way that I do or dress the way that I do or do business the way that I do. And so it was just constantly a struggle to push past that and to just follow my vision and follow what I was seeing in my mind, but I really do work hard to, to say what I need to say and to send that message in a new kind of way, because I think for so many years it's been so hidden or so just hard to find, and also it's presented in a way that, and I'm not hating on anybody, we need every kind of advocate that there is, and we need the people to stand at podiums, and we need the people to fight at the courthouse and all that stuff. But what I saw that was lacking was sort of an entertaining take on all of that, and something that the general public, people who otherwise just would never even think about disability, that's the population that we really need to be, looking at, because and of course we need all, like I said, we need all the different kinds of advocacy, right. But we also need to have somebody who is going to bring pop culture into the mix, because whether we like it or not, we live in a society that's built on Hollywood and pop culture. Absolutely. And if we want a seat at the main table, we have to play the game, and I think there are lots of people doing similar work, but, I think what makes me different and what makes the ability advocates, that group a little bit different is, like I said, we're not going to, I also go to special education conferences and educational stuff and all of that. But to be honest with you, that stuff is kind of secondary to me. I'm honored to be working with Stanford. I'm honored to be doing all this other stuff. But, I think the real mission for me is to reach the people who are just standing out on the street, at a festival, because those are the people who, if they can't buy into what we're proposing, then it doesn't matter what the educators think. It doesn't matter what the scholars think. We need the everyday person to not only be aware, but also be excited about it. So that's just kind of why I just try to make it like fun and engaging and spread that message of really it's just love. It's just like we need to love all people. We need to celebrate diversity beyond just the color of your skin, all diversity, all difference. And so anyway, that was a very long rant. I'm sorry.
I see you getting fired up. I like that.
But I think you bring up a good point, because there's a couple things I'm thinking of while you're talking. Is one, you're right. Like the generation now, like we have our millennial generations in charge now, or trying to be. And then we've got, Gen Z is coming in, and there's, you don't get their attention unless you're entertaining them. And so you got to do, like you said, you got to play the game. But then also I think about too, I could hear naysayers saying like, you know, you're somehow, what's the word I'm looking for? Like cheapening the movement. But it's like disabled people get to be entertaining when they want to be. Like they get to have fun too. And I don't see, like, I could see people kind of saying that, like, you know, we have to be serious about this. And it's like, but why? Like they're people, everybody's people. And some people want to be influencers. And if they happen to be disabled and also want to be advocates, like who gets to determine how people get to advocate for themselves? And I think there's like so many layers there that you're addressing when you take it to, you know, a pop culture perspective with your work.
So I think it's, you know, I think it's great. I've definitely, you know, watched a lot of the stuff you put out. Like I said, one of the things that I really enjoyed was, you know, the music that you were making with your students. And why don't you tell us a little bit, like explain for everybody, I guess, who might you know, fall onto this this conversation. Why don't you explain a little bit about what you were doing in that project and how that helped your I guess your efforts?
So I mean, again, I do a lot of different kinds of creative stuff, and it all started in the classroom. Obviously, it all started with me, you know, being interested in the field of special education, and you know, I was on the road to becoming a teacher when I started to have all these crazy ideas, and you know, initially, my ideas were just to go into a classroom and do this kind of work, but you know, just like Rosalie was saying, that's exactly the kind of pushback I've gotten all of my career is people don't understand. Why do I care about what I wear? Why do I, you know, why don't I dress like a teacher? Why do I cheapen the movement by you know, not acting like a scholar? So I have had to sort of develop a thick skin because it's hard. It's hard when you believe in something and you come in with what you're excited about your ideas and people are like, no, that's not how we do it. Or, you know, you're cheapening the movement, or you're, you know, I think the other thing that people sometimes think is that I'm somehow like trying to get attention for myself off of the backs of people with disabilities, or, you know, like I'm trying to be a star or something. And it's just not about that. If, you know, if people can't understand it, I just sort of let that part go because it's not important to me. You know, I don't need everybody to understand, but it is, every move that I make is based on strategy, and every move that I make is based on, you know, well thought out planning. And I really put a lot of thought and energy into everything that I do. And so I ended up feeling like in the classroom, I wasn't, you know, I didn't have that freedom. So I was just like, well, then I'll just go do it myself. And then it became, you know, sort of a public brand. And then I started to get more opportunities, and more, you know, different people were asking me to do different things. And that's when everything started to really be fun for me because, you know, even though within the world of educators and scholars, I wasn't really being respected, and I wasn't really, you know, they weren't able to see where I was going in the real world, you know, where it actually matters. Just kidding. But not really. Exactly. But in the real world, you know, I was really getting a lot of the, people wanted it. People wanted me to bring what I was bringing to the table, you know. So with the group, the Ability Advocates, that's one thing that really grew once I started to think more publicly, because I just thought, okay, you don't want us at your, you know, talent show. Okay, well, guess what? We'll go to Carnival Festival and we'll be on the main stage. Nice. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was, that's sort of how it all started to get going. And the more I did it, the more it was just like, well, I could do more then. Well, that was easier than I thought, or whatever. And so the music video was it started out with just a song we were doing, you know, we were writing our own song, and then they were so excited that we did a music video, and
that's what I was gonna ask. Did they got to do like the lyrics, and like they worked with you on that?
Oh, we collaborated. Yeah, we collaborated. So we had a few different meetings where we sat at a table, because, you know, I think that another thing, you know, going back to cheapening the movement, I do think there are a lot of other places where people with disabilities are able to, you know, maybe speak on a microphone or go up to a podium and say something. But a lot of times it's at a special education event, or it's at a, you know what I mean? Which is not a bad thing. That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of times we find ourselves preaching to the choir, and it's like, those people already know, they already are on board. And so, and also, it's in the context of a more like professional kind of thing, which is great. It's amazing. Or even a political thing, which is great and amazing. But people with disabilities, just like anybody else, some people want to be on stage. Some people want to be a star. Some people want to be on Instagram and take selfies, and we're not giving them access to that,
Right.
And so really what I'm doing is, and I'll tell them like, okay, tomorrow we're performing here, or tomorrow we're speaking here. I want you to wear the coolest outfit that you have. You know what I mean? And like come with your swag on, like because that's sort of how we do businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's what I tell them too, is you guys are the stars of this show.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if we're speaking or singing or whatever. Our job is to inspire people by making them feel like you are the coolest people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do feel like we do that. I think we accomplished that. And I think people are shocked at, they would just never think that it would be possible. They don't see that ability at first glance.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they were excited about the music. So we had our little meetings, and I kind of got their input. We put the song together, then we filmed the music video, and we went on a little tour. So
how did the beat making go? Did they get to participate in that too, or did you have someone else do the beat?
Well, so I am also a musician and a performer, and so I grew up, and again, I think that helped me a lot in sort of creating my business strategy and sort of doing things the way that I do. But I created a few different versions, and they hated most of them. So I remember I had set up a deadline because I really wanted to go on tour with the song, and our tour dates were already scheduled. So I remember I stayed up so late one night because I had a meeting the next day with the Ability Advocates, and I stayed up late putting together this idea, and in my head I was like, they are going to like it or they're not, but it doesn't matter. We're going with this beat either way because I don't have time to make another one.
Yeah.
And thank God they loved it. So, so it ended up just working out, but I was like, this is what it is, whether you like it or not.
But I love that. So, because I think that's what probably people need to understand is they're getting a lot of say in this. Like they're not being toted around. Like they're getting to write their lyrics. They get to decide the beats. They get to decide how they dress them. And the lyrics, like he was playing the music the other day. We were getting ready in the morning, and I was like, that was the first thing I thought. I was like, they had to have written these. Like this is like authentic, feelings that they have. And
you definitely got their personality out of it. And even in the video, I was like, man, these kids are fun. And what's wild to me is like, you literally are doing this in addition to your regular teaching stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's just crazy. Like, this is the stuff that blows my mind is how much, and this is the point of this thing I think that we're doing is we're like, we got to spotlight this. We got to make sure people understand, like, this is the type of passion that's out there.
Yeah, because teaching alone, like just doing what you're required to do is so much work. Like we're doing multiple things at once when we're in the classroom, and then to go beyond that, it takes a lot. And I think there was something you were talking about earlier too about the pushback you got, which made me think about just generally like going into an English classroom, because I teach English, and being like, we need to do things a little different, like, and then getting pushback from veteran teachers that are they just don't want to change. And that's where it really
that's not the way we do that.
That's not how we do things. We're going to do this thing we've been doing for 30 years. And
this is the way we've done it forever.
And it just like, it can be really frustrating. And then I wonder too, because I feel like I really feel you on that, like getting pushback from people who are like, this is how we've always done it. How dare you try to shake things up? But something I've also noticed is I have people who come to me being in my 5th year, and they're like, I remember when I was young, like you and enthusiastic, you'll get over it. Like, do you ever have people say,
Yeah. All the
oh,
time.
Yeah, of course.
I hate when I'm like, first of all, you don't know me. Like, I could be enthusiastic
Yeah.
my whole life. Like, and second of all, like, how sad for you. Like, I wouldn't admit that.
Yeah.
Like, why are you still here,
Yeah,
bro?
exactly.
Get out of here, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I for sure get that a lot.
So, Mr. Stephan, full disclosure, we lost half of our interview, so we're starting again. But really important question for you: what was your favorite teaching moment in the 6 years you've been a teacher?
Yeah, so the first thing that pops into my head is definitely something that actually does not even have to do with my students. But ever since I first started teaching, it's been really important for me to make sure that, because in special education, you work with a staff, you have assistants who work under you. And one of the favorite activities for special education teachers is to talk smack on their assistants. And that's always really bothered me. And I understand to a degree because, the assists or the paraprofessionals, whatever you call them, they are, they don't have to go to school. They don't come in with a ton of training. And so, it can be rough sometimes, but regardless, those are the people who are there to support you. That's your team, that's your family. And so it's always been really important for me to create a community where it's not only the students who are benefiting from the program, but it's also the staff in the room. And I want them to feel just respected, and I want them to feel powerful. I want them to feel like they are my equals and like we're a family. And so probably one of my favorite moments was a few years back. There was, I guess there's what was it? National Boss Day. That's what it is. National Boss Day. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And my staff came in with a card, and each of them wrote a big long thing about how I'm the best boss ever, and they've never felt so respected, and two of them were 65 plus. They'd been in the game for a long time, and so for those people to say, never ever have I ever felt so respected, that was probably one of my proudest moments, not just as a teacher, just in general. I think it's important when you are a leader. Leadership does come with a level of power, and it comes with a level of privilege, and it comes with responsibility. Anytime you hold a position of power, you are responsible to use that in the way that is going to best serve the world. And so, I think just in general terms, inside or outside of the classroom, that's always been very important to me. And so that was one instance where I really felt like it was just validating. Like I knew that I had accomplished that goal of really making them feel like we were, more than just coworkers. And I wasn't just their boss. I was somebody who they really respected. And so that was a really great moment for me.
Yeah. And then what was for me, what I love about this is because, like I had said, the first time we interviewed was that the saying is always that your team is only as strong as its weakest link. But I know from my experience, a team's only as strong as its leader. And in this particular case, this is a team that works with students with disabilities. And so you're not just doing this for them, which is important, but when you take care of your team, that team's going to turn around and take care of the students. And so this benefits them. And then it also models it for them. They're seeing the way you interact, and they're understanding this is how we interact in the real world. This is how we interact with adults. And I just thought that's such an important thing that we need to understand as teachers, as teacher leaders, especially. Like that's really important, and I really appreciated that story, and I'm sure those assistants, paraprofessionals appreciated it. And you gave a shout out yesterday. Was it Patty? Patty was your Patty
Fung. Yeah. She's definitely. I mean, all of them. Every single I mean, I'm literally still friends with every person who's ever worked in my classroom. And, so I love them all. But I think you guys had asked me, is there one person who sort of is your go-to for just business support? And definitely Patty Fung. And she was an assistant in my classroom. But that relationship ended up becoming, I obviously, just like all of the other people I work with, a friendship. But with her, it definitely became also, almost a business partnership, because she just, for so many years, she would hear all the craziness that came out of my mind. And, she would really help me to figure out what my next moves were. And she also really learned how to understand the way that I think, because, I was saying before that I just have these visions and I see it in my mind, and a lot of people don't understand how it's going to come out into the real world. And so, oftentimes she would be like, I don't know if that's going to work, or maybe, maybe that's not the best idea. And then I would do it and she'd be like, oh, okay, now I understand. And so, I think now she never questions it. Sometimes she'll be like, I still don't know, but I feel like you're going to make it happen. So, really having somebody like that on my team, not only as a friend, but, as somebody, I really do call her often with business stuff. And I'm like, should I post this, or should I, I'm thinking of starting this project. Do you think it's worth my time and energy? And so she's really somebody who has become more than a friend. And, she's very much a business partner for me at this point. Yeah.
Well, shout out Patty Fung.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
We need our teacher allies and to always support them too. And I think that was interesting when you first mentioned this story. I didn't realize that there was this cultural practice of special ed teachers not being so caring to their paraprofessionals. I've only had experience with paras. Well, when I had my collaborative teacher last year with me, we also had a para assigned to us, but we're actually kind of short on paras at our site. So she ended up having to go to another class that just had more of a need. And she was great. And then the only other times I've worked with a para was when I was a sub, and I've subbed for special ed, and I needed them. I didn't, the teacher wasn't there.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do you guys do in these situations? And they always helped. So it didn't even occur to me that was like, I guess I've just been lucky that I worked with paras who had good relationships with their sped teachers. But that's, for me as a general ed teacher, very enlightening to know that that's kind of a thing that happens in other areas.
Yeah, and I mean, and it definitely, I'm not hating on anybody. I understand how people could go in that direction. Like I said, a lot of times they do come with little to no training. Many of them didn't go to college. They're not special education, they're not knowledgeable on special education. I get it. I get why it could be frustrating. But I think the thing is, there are amazing paras and amazing, assistants working in classrooms. And then there are other people who maybe aren't so amazing right off the bat, but I think this can be true for special education teachers or general education teachers, and really for anybody who has any type of position of leadership. The thing is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're great or if they're average or if they're below average. What matters is that you have the power to make or break their day a lot of times. You have the power to make them feel powerful and empowered. And if you don't use that power to do that, in my humble opinion, you aren't using your power to its full potential. And that's what it is. It's there are tons of paraprofessionals who have amazing work ethic and so many skills. And it's easy to love them, it's easy to respect them, and it's easy to include them. But it's all of the people who are coming from just various backgrounds and from all different kinds of neighborhoods, looking for work, and they happen upon this job, and maybe they're not the best suited, but you have the power to empower them to become better. And you have the power to make or break their day. And that's a huge responsibility,
Absolutely.
Regardless if it's a paraprofessional or the custodian or whoever, we do, even general education teachers hold a lot of power in that regard. You have a custodian who comes in your classroom every single day, and you have the choice to you know, to act superior or to, you know, to really include that person in your day and make them feel like they're a part of your team, because they are. You know, who's going to clean your classroom? Who's going to, you know, monitor the hallways? All of those people are very important. And it just doesn't matter the position. I think teachers do hold a lot more responsibility than what we sort of think about on a daily basis. I think that the general idea is the teacher's in charge of the classroom and the students are the people who are impacted by their work. But that's not the end of it. You know, we also work very closely with a range of people, all the way from administrators to you know, assistants to custodians to secretaries. I mean, it's everybody. And we talk to all of them and we interact with all of them and we receive support from all of them. So, you know, just using that leadership and that power that comes with it for good, I think is such a big message, especially for new teachers, because it's easy to walk in with a big head and to feel like, oh, I'm a boss now because I'm a teacher, right? And it's like, you're not that cool if that's the way you're thinking.
A lot of props, man, and a lot of respect, much respect to, you know, the fact that you had that wisdom, I guess, that you were able to adopt that perspective and you know, develop that philosophy. It speaks really to your skills and abilities as a leader. You know, especially with the way you handled those colleagues of yours that had so many more years in the game, as you put it. You know, it's like, I mean, you had the legitimate authority as their boss, but you were also able to recognize when to take their lead, it sounds like, when to acknowledge their experience and let them sort of dictate sort of next steps whenever, you know, you felt like you could rely on them for whatever was going on in the classroom. So I know I have experience with some stuff like that as well, and it's really wild when you see those people who are in that position and refuse to accept input from other people, and it really is a detriment to everybody when people can't come in with humility and respect like you're describing. So I think it's amazing. I'm really curious about, like, sort of what types of experiences you had prior to, I guess, getting into the classroom that helped prepare you for that.
Yeah, where do you feel like your leadership origins are?
Well, you get that.
Yeah.
Well, you get that, dude.
Well, you know, I have to credit my grandpa. He definitely just, I remember, because he was a teacher and you know, when I was growing up, from when I was young, you know, I think when I was really young, you know, maybe elementary, middle, high school, there was always just chaos in my house, I feel like. And I used to think that my grandpa would sort of take me around everywhere because he wanted my help, because that's what I would do. I would follow him around and I would go to his job and I would grade papers and, you know, do all this crazy stuff. But now looking back, I you know, it's crazy to realize that he was saving me from what was going on, you know, in my home. And so, you know, I'm just super grateful. But, you know, one of the things that I really, it's crazy that I always remember, and I always remember a very specific moment. We were walking, he was teaching at Delta College and I was going with him, you know, pretty much every day. And so he kind of would talk me through his day, just like sort of like almost like a think out loud kind of thing. He would just, you know, sort of tell me why he did certain things and why he thought certain ways. And I always remember we were walking, you know, just from class to class or something. And I remember him just that day, for whatever reason, every single freaking person, he knew them and they were stopping him. And I mean, it happened often, but it was just like that day was insane. I mean, it was custodians and it was, you know, teachers and it was administrators, it was a bunch of students. I mean, it was just a whole range of people. And I always remember that day he told me, you know, you need to always be humble, because a lot of these teachers and a lot of these higher ups come out here and they treat everybody like they're nothing, you know. And he told me, you see all these people who are my friends, it's the janitors, it's the students, it's the, you know, secretaries. I'm friends with everybody because I respect everybody. And because I respect them, they also respect me. And you know, he always kind of said things like that, and he said it a little less. He's always much more. I feel like when he says it, it sounds nicer. When I say it, it sounds like I'm trying to like tell you what to do or something. But I always remember that day, and you know, and my grandma also said things like that. But it was a little bit different because I was just sort of witnessing. You know, that day was it was really crazy, and ever since I mean, that's really where I think it started, where I just was determined. I was like, I don't care what, I am going to make every single person feel so important when they talk to me. You know, and so I think that's where that started. I feel like, again, that was a very long and unorganized answer.
No, that's a story. That was a beautiful story.
We have to shout out the man, the legend, Mike Torres, your grandfather that we're talking about. He's definitely a very kind-hearted person, and
he's nice. He doesn't say things that sound mean ever. So
I know. So
well, I think again, you know, that's where I get so much. I mean, my grandma and my grandpa. But when it comes to the public stuff, I mean, so much of that comes from my grandpa because, you know, I think, you know, we were saying before that a lot of the criticism that I get or that I hear about myself is, you know, that because I do entertainment, it's like not as legitimate, or because I dress to entertain and I speak to entertain and I perform, you know, to entertain. It's interesting how people perceive that as I want attention and I'm trying to be a star and I think I'm this and I think I'm that. But it's always been interesting to me to watch my grandpa because, you know, on one hand, he has that star power, I guess. Like he does walk in and perform, and he does look for the attention when it's time, you know. But he also really, really always, it was always important for him to, you know, sort of talk to me about how there's a time and a place for that. And then you also need to turn around and be humble. And you also need to realize that is a job and that's a strategy and that's not who you need to be every day of your life. And so, you know, it's very interesting to balance that. And it's very tricky sometimes. And so even, I think especially for me, because I'm bringing entertainment to a world where it normally isn't there, you know, and so I'm always thinking about, okay, is this, you know, because a lot of times I'll post like pictures of myself because that's what gets attention, and then I'll put, you know, my message and I'll share, you know, my ideas or whatever, and so it's almost like an influencer approach to
well, you are
talking about disability.
Legitimate influencer, and it's not in it. I think people want to put a negative connotation on that, but the reality is that's the future. And I think if you try to deny that, you're just in denial, right? Because the more you see teachers utilizing social media, the more you see teachers being effective at reaching their students. So I think it's just craziness when people are like, oh well, how could you use that? You're going to use any tool you can to be effective at your job. And I mean, I really appreciate what you've done. If I've been like, you know, like I said, I really enjoyed looking at all your stuff online. And what I noticed about it is just the quality of work that you're doing, and it's legit, like production quality. It's thoughtful.
Thank you.
And I think that's really. It would not surprise me if what you're doing is really going to be seen as the norm moving forward. It's just a matter of time. I mean, I can predict, I guess, especially now during pandemic, where people are doing online. I mean, everyone is doing online teaching. If you struggle at all with with using technology and using media, social media, and using video and audio. Like, you're gonna be behind the curve. So those people who aren't trying to do the things you're doing are really just putting themselves at a disadvantage and putting their students at a disadvantage. So I don't take any heed to what the haters are saying, dude. Like, you should forget those people. They don't know what they're talking about.
And there is, like, we know that there's a ton of teacher influencers out there, like, spreading their message. And I mean, they're not just making a name for themselves, they're sharing important resources, and they're fighting for their causes. And there's some that are kind of tacky, but majority of the time I follow a lot of teacher influencers on Twitter and Instagram, and I get a lot of good ideas from them. There's the assignment I did on the first day of school this year, I got from an influencer on Twitter, and it's an amazing, apparently it's a well-known thing. I didn't know, I heard about it on Twitter, but it's like a letter of 10 things I wish you knew. You write this letter to your students, and then you have them write one in return to you. And
kids love it.
They love it. I've been reading them all weekend. I love it. Like,
she reads them to me because they're so good.
I read them to him because they're just so sweet. Some of them are hilarious because they, you find out who the comedians are, and then you find out who are the ones that they'll be honest. Last year I did it in the middle of the year, and I had decided this has got to be a beginning of year project. And but last year, because my students we had already known each other for at least a semester, they were very vulnerable in those letters and shared things with me that were just heartbreaking. And so, and I got that idea from Twitter, and so I think that's important, that you're sharing resources, you're up with the times. It's okay to be entertaining. And I think also, the other thing I think about is one of my other friends who teaches, he shared with me that he has a special Instagram just for his students. And he was like, communication was so much better when I created this Instagram. Like, they were watching. And so he sent it to me, or like he followed me so I could follow him so I could see it. And I was like, that's genius. Why did I not think of that? Like, if you're not keeping up with social media, like, what are you doing? Because that's how you get to these kids. That's what they're on.
I think especially too with your area with special ed, it's huge to be bringing that into the mainstream. I mean, it's just perfect, man. Like, you have this issue, that really is in the back or underground, like you're saying. It's behind the scenes, and people sort of try to just, not acknowledging it is sort of the default. So what you've done is you're putting the spotlight on it, and you're saying, no, it's cool. Here we are. And I think the levity that you bring to it too is like, you do it real gracefully. You do it with respect, and you do it with humor, and just it's love. You bring love, man. So I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, man, I love your stuff.
And the important thing too, and I want you to talk a little about this too, because like we talked about it before, your ability advocates are part of the decision-making process. So like, tell us again, like, about that process.
So the ability advocates, listen, I'm not sure which parts were cut off from the previous session.
Just share it all.
I'll just start again. So the ability advocates is part of sort of the work that I do publicly, and it's probably one of my favorite projects, because a lot of my public stuff is me on my own. I'm creating curriculum, and I'm doing public speaking, and I'm a one-man band most of the time. And so I love working with the ability advocates. And so that's a group that I started a while ago, and it started off as just sort of a classroom project, and it was going to be just sort of like a classroom thing, and my students were going to have the opportunity to do something new. So it was my first year of teaching, and I teach students who have what we currently refer to as moderate to severe disabilities. And I had been working on this sort of social movement curriculum that I wanted to just try out, and it was basically something. And now it's a fully developed thing that I use all the time. But at that point, I just had this idea. I just thought, like, what if I could teach these kids, about sort of all the different, or a bunch of different social movements from the 1960s, and then we can end on the disability rights movement, and it all just sort of makes sense, and we could just empower them to, have a voice and to do cool things, and everybody was like, they're not going to understand. What are you doing that for? They don't know what you're talking about. And I was just like, no. Like, I know we can do this. And so it is very simplified. It's a very simplified version of things that you would learn anyway in high school. And I was in high school at that time, and I was a high school teacher. And so that it ended up being successful, and that curriculum, and I mean, so successful that I ended up developing it a ton more, and it's up on my website and all of that. But we started there, and we decided to create our own sort of advocacy group, just there on campus. And I think I talked about it a little bit before, but all of these ideas and all of this, the whole like public brand was never meant to be public. It was always meant to be just, I have these cool ideas for when I become a teacher. I have these cool ideas now that I am a teacher. But when you're somebody like me who has crazy ideas that are very different, a lot of times you get shot down. And it's also important to mention that I do work with a population of people that most, even professionals, grown adults, don't know how to understand people with disabilities. And so, I was just shot down enough times that I was like, well, you know what? You don't want us at your stupid talent show? We're going to be at the Carnival Festival on the main stage, so we'll see you there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that first year I scheduled this tour, and it was all of the major, most iconic festivals in San Francisco. And I was shocked that they all gave us time on the stage. So then I was like, well, we should do more of this. If it's possible, why wouldn't we? And that was sort of the start of all things, public that I do now. And so with the Ability Advocates, it just ended up being something that grew, and it's not just students in my class anymore. It's students who have been in my class, or students who were never even in my class, and it's students in San Francisco and in Las Vegas, and just all it's expanded, and I hope that it continues to expand. I'm working on ways to do stuff during the pandemic, but definitely after the pandemic, there will be just so many opportunities to bring that to Stockton. One of the biggest, not the biggest, but one of the maybe coolest projects that we did was our, original song and music video that came along with the song. And so, I think that's what you're asking me to talk about, and then I just went on this big long rant.
No, it's okay. It's
but
good background on how you got to that point to get them to write a song.
Yeah. So it ends up. So basically, our mission is to provide opportunities for people with different abilities to be seen, heard, and respected in our communities. We want to put them in positions of public leadership. And so a lot of times that involves being up on stage, or being at community meetings, or being at, wherever. But also in order to get them there, especially if they're people who are not in my classroom, we need to also have meetings together, and I have to get them on board with what we're doing. I have to make sure that they understand at whatever level they're able to understand that our mission is to stand up and have a voice and demand respect, and so we would have our meetings, and we would talk about different projects and different things that we were doing throughout the year. And just, I don't know, everybody seemed to be a little bit musical, and even students who, even people who some of the ability advocates are nonverbal, so they don't speak with words. You know, they don't communicate with words. And there was one of our ability advocates was not really verbal, but he would rap these songs, like these crazy songs.
Awesome.
And so I was just like, what if we tried to do our own song? And freaking everybody was so excited about it. And so I was like, okay, well, let's work on some ideas. And so we had a couple of meetings where we just sat around a table, and I was like, tell me everything you want to say about the ability advocates. And I just made like a big, long chicken scratch list of things that they thought about it. And then I basically put together a layout of lyrics. And then I went back to them and I was like, okay, this is what I have. What do you think? And so, and then we sort of back and forth had their input and sort of, just I wanted to see what they thought about it. And then I think I was telling you that I recorded, because I also play music. So I recorded, I think, 3 different tracks to for the song, and they hated all of them. Every single one. They're just like, no, this is not going to work. And so, I the final track that we ended up using, I stayed up all night long right before our final meeting, because we had a deadline I just knew that we needed to finish the song by a certain date if we wanted to also have a music video and also go on tour and sing the song. And so I was just like up all night, and I just was thinking to myself, whether they like this or not, this is the one, because we don't have any time anymore. And they ended up loving it. And so that was the story of the song. But yeah, I mean, they had so much input and they had so much to say about it. And I sort of wrote the lyrics, but I wrote the lyrics with all of their input. I literally sat with my notes just spread across the table, and put stuff together using quotes and using ideas that they came up with on their own.
You're big on collaboration, it seems like. I was looking at on the website, you have stuff about like your talks that you give, and like there's a link where it shows like help build the talk and show direct, and I was like, what? So you present basically whatever it is that very, very specific to whatever your audience is looking for. You can talk a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, definitely. So on my website, there is, I created this chart to sort of, help people determine, first of all, whether or not they want to book me for a speech, but also so that they kind of see what I normally do. And then I do have the option for, if you want something else, if you want something that's not here, let me know and we can figure something out. But yeah, I think I am big on collaboration, but the reason I am big on it is because, beyond that, I love for people to feel empowered, and I think that's the most sort of meaningful way that you can empower people is through giving them that space to be collaborative and to to have input and to have a say in what's going on. And so across the board, no matter what I'm doing, I love collaboration. So I love to do live events because I think, first of all, a lot of times, we talked about it a bit before, that a lot of times people will go and speak and they say a lot of the same stuff that I'm saying, but it's maybe a little boring, or maybe maybe it's like not so fun to listen to, and then the message isn't sent all the way, and so I do love to do live stuff because then I get the opportunity to go to all these different kinds of places, and I get to I treat it like a concert, what I mean? I go up there with the intention to like get people up and get people excited and get people to feel like inspired and motivated. And my intention is always, I never ever want there to be a moment where people are sitting there just praying for it to end. You know what I mean? Because
it's really interesting.
I go to enough speeches where I'm sitting there praying for it to end.
Hey, we were talking to another performer who's also a teacher, and I just think it's very interesting because you see the qualities of a performer and how valuable it is to know how to read an audience, and how that really impacts whether or not your message gets across. And it's the professors and the teachers I've had and that were most effective in my life have always been the ones who knew how to read a room and could adapt and sort of like, oh, I'm gonna adjust now because all of you are off somewhere else and you're not here with me, so let's get back here and let's talk about it. And I was like, wow, those who had that skill I always admired, and it's definitely got to be true for you. As a performer, you probably developed that skill quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And growing up with,
so I grew up.
I
grew up in a family band, and I was 10 years old when I was like full time on the road with them, and it was, 3 shows a week, 4-hour shows, but it was 12-hour days because we did our own lights and everything, and it was a party band, and I think that does make a huge difference, versus like a jazz band or an orchestra. A party band, when you're in a party band, I would say 80% of your job is to read the room, because you are the party. You have to be exciting. You have to be fun. You have to know when you need to switch up the next song because people aren't responding. Otherwise the party dies, literally. And so, I think when I was younger, like 10, that was rough for me because I was so shy. And I was I didn't want to dance on stage, and I didn't want to this, and I didn't want to that. And it was, but I knew because, my grandpa had, started the band so long ago, and they had already made a name for themselves. They had their own brand, and I knew that it was serious. I knew it wasn't a game. I knew that, they were getting paid good money to be doing what they were doing. So I knew there was no room for messing around. And so it was rough the first few years. I hated, it was just painful for me sometimes because it wasn't something that I was, I think just naturally I was so shy and I was so quiet and I was so like scared of everything. And but I'm so grateful for all those years because that's what it taught me. I had to learn how to read a room. I had to learn, and I had my uncle and my aunt were the front people on the microphones. And once I got old enough, they started to expect me to do that, and for me to sort of because sometimes my uncle and my aunt would not come on time, or they would come later on, we would go set up and they would come when it was time or whatever. And my uncle, who was the drummer, who was also the manager, who was always there, he hated speaking on the microphone. So it was then it became like my thing. And I was like, I don't want to, I'm scared, I can't do it. And they were like, oh, you have to. So all of that just really prepared me because that's what I think for advocacy, you need to have that. You need to be able to walk into a room and all of that fear and all of that, like, what if they don't like me, or what if I make a mistake, or what if whatever, you have to just push past that no matter what, and I think also in teaching, it's the same. And also in doing the sort of the public speaking part of what I do, that's a performance. I have to know how to walk in with confidence. I have to know how to move my body so that I look like a star. I have to, because that makes a difference. I have to know how to use my voice so that I sound like someone who needs to be on stage. All of that stuff is really important. And I wouldn't have those skills if I hadn't had all of that, training. What is it? Training, like brutal training. Yeah.
Well, it was definitely thrust upon you, and it seems like it's definitely come to to so good use these days, So,
because you got to see like a professional side of entertainment. Like it's all fun when you're at the party on the dance floor, but the Mike Torres band is a serious business and they're doing professional things. So learning how to make entertainment, a business, like this is, it's there's a lot of work and you're doing that work. And I think, and you had mentioned before, not sure if this got cut off, but you're trying to reach audiences that don't normally come to listen about ability needs. And so you've got to be out there, you've got to catch their attention, and you have been trained in that because your family is so deep in the entertainment industry. I think that's really important. And I think that's important too, that, disabilities are the invisible minority, and we need to reach everyone, and that's the best way to do it is through entertainment.
You really crafted your skill there, your entertainment abilities. But then I think what's beautiful is that you've also really focused heavily on special education. And like I was looking at your curriculum stuff there, and I was like, man, this is thorough stuff. And it's like, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you were able to do that, because I didn't really understand everything that I was looking at, but it was like the I do, we do, you do. Talk a little bit about how you started making your own curriculum.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started because I think we talked about it earlier on that when you are a special education teacher, on your first day of work, first year of teaching, they walk you into a big empty room and then they say, good luck, make something happen. And so that was, you just have to, you have to make stuff. And so, every teacher does it. It's just, and I don't know really where it comes from, but I've just always been creative in a weird way. And I've always happened upon books, like random books. Like I remember when I was like 10, I was in a library, we didn't even go to libraries. I don't know what I was doing in a library. But I was in a library and I saw this book that it was called like How to Look Good on Camera or something like that. And I just read it, and a lot of my current skills, I think, come from that experience of reading that book, because I was a very awkward, shy, I was very overweight, I was everything you would think of when you think of a loser. I think that's what I was. I don't think I was a loser. I just think that, by society standards, I was a loser. And so I think reading that book, it helped me to prepare for one day I'm gonna be like this. One day I'm gonna, and I always read random books, and so I always had these ideas about all these different things like marketing and graphics and acting and Hollywood, and I mean just all that, like super. And I still read very random books. I love to read books outside of the world of education, because that's, I can bring that in, I can bring that in and do really cool things with it. But when I first started to make my own curriculum, I was just making it for my classroom like everybody else. And then I started to think, well, maybe, my friend down the hall can use it. So I'll make it a little bit more general. And then it became, well, maybe I can like put it on a website or something, and maybe I can this. And then I started to really, really, now when I create stuff, my goal is for it to be as good or better than professional quality, products. Right. And so, I really, really put a lot of attention to detail and really making sure the design is right and making sure it looks great and that it's easy to use and that it's thorough. And so, that's everything sort of started as like a little project, and it all just sort of grew and grew with the more I did public work, the more I wanted to just make sure that I was presenting high quality content across the board.
And I think that leads us into what I think also got cut off, is that the current curriculum you developed for distance learning. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about it. So I had already started working on a project called the Ability Academy Online, and it was supposed to be just kind of like a few video lessons and video activities that teachers could use for distance learning. And it was right when right when the pandemic started, and it was meant to be sort of a limited program. And then I realized that we were coming back to distance learning. And so I ended up spending a lot of the summer sort of revamping that program and making it into this, this interactive sort of slideshow that you could use for your classrooms for special education. And it's interactive, so it can be different every day. And there's a whole bunch of different activities and assignments on there, and it's so easy to use. So I know that for a lot of teachers, especially teachers who are not tech savvy, who have very little tech skills, distance learning has been rough. And so,
yes,
yeah,
I hear about it.
So this, and the other thing is that our students, it's a little different from general education, because we can't just assign a reading, and we can't always, even a video, we can't always assign a video and expect that they're going to do anything with it without support. But we also can't expect that families are going to be there to support them every single day. And so this program is really meant to provide a super easy to use platform with a bunch of, meaningful content that is hopefully going to be stuff that students can do independently, or at least more independently. And it's called the Ability Academy Click and Go program. And I'm calling it that because literally all you need is the link to the presentation. You click on it and you can get started right away. You don't need like a Google account. You don't need to sign into anything. It's very easy. And so I'm excited to put that up on my website.
And you're offering it for free. You're
for free.
Yeah, you're like, which is also super awesome. You're helping out these teachers that are struggling in this time, and I think that's such a noble thing to do. Put all this energy into something, and then you're offering it, which also makes me think about the people who come to you and say like, you're just trying to be famous or whatever, and it's like, look at the work he's doing. Like, that's not like, you don't do that kind of stuff and offer it for free.
Yeah. Yeah, no, everything I do is for free. The only money making part of my business is the public speaking. That's the only time that I make money, and that's only sometimes. Yeah. So no, yeah, everything's for free. Everything, the idea is to really support people out there who need it, and yes, my brand is primarily disability centered, but really it's diversity in general. That's the real idea. Because even when we talk about inclusion for people with disabilities, how can we achieve that if we're not advocating for inclusion for everybody? It's just, it wouldn't work if we are, if you're fighting for the inclusion of any one group of people, you're going nowhere. I think we need to really, it needs to be everything, and it needs to be everybody.
Exactly.
And so, it's a lot of fun to do some of the stuff that I do, and it's a lot of work to do some of the other stuff that I do.
It looks like so
but at the end of the day,
work. Oh my goodness.
And I think that's super important. Is like you said before, this is the invisible minority, and we've got to include them in the conversation. And we talked about universal design for learning a lot, especially those of us in the area that went to teachers college. They really incorporated UDL into our credentialing program, and we talk about that all the time. Like, how do we create ramps instead of stairs, in our classroom? Because
I love it.
Everybody can do it. Anybody who comes in, it's there and it's accessible, and it doesn't overburden the teacher in having to make, when you're a general ed teacher and you have an IEP or 504 student, you've got to modify. So you got to do something different. And that's a lot of work. But if you've already designed your curriculum or your lessons to be a ramp, then there's a little tweaks you might have to make, but it's a lot, easier on the teacher, it's easier on the students, it's inclusive, and we're not going to learn to do that more if we don't start thinking more about our disabled neighbors and community members in a way that, you told the story about you had a little shopping trip you took with your students one time, and one of them knocked everything off of the shelf, and people, they're quick to respond with anger. And I think you even made the comment too, where there's some people who think like that's why those people shouldn't be out in public, or and the only way we're going to squash those kinds of thoughts is being more inclusive in that way. And I think that's really important. Your story actually reminded me of one of the APs at my site is a special education. And she told me a story recently about a student that destroyed her classroom, and she just quietly got all the other kids out and left him in there to do his thing, and just kept an eye on him to make sure he wasn't hurting himself. And when he was done, she said he just collapsed in her arms and said, "I wish I wasn't this way anymore." And I think like people don't realize like it's not a choice. Like, you can't help it. You can't help.
And some people are not able to even say that. I had a student one year who I love him. He's gigantic. First of all, he's like 6'5",
oh my goodness.
like red hair. He always wears shorts no matter what the weather. He has freckles all over his whole body. He looks like, it's just like, it's almost like it's not a real person. He looks so fun. But he was I just loved him, and everybody, nobody didn't like him. But one day I brought cupcakes, and everybody got a cupcake, and then there were like 2 left, and he wanted another cupcake. And I was like, well, so sorry that there's not enough for everybody. And he was like, but I want a cupcake. I was like, well, and he wasn't really verbal. Like, I mean, he could say cupcake or cupcake, please, but it wasn't like, I really would like a cupcake right now. It was limited words. And it ended up becoming insane. And it was directed at me. He was on me, trying to like literally squish my head, spitting at me, kicking everything. And I just had my arms out trying to protect my face. He's like, that's my moneymaker. But he was, and it was an hour at least. And
wow.
My staff at that time were, older women. So they weren't involved in helping me and physically, and it was really crazy. But I was just calm. I was just like, so sorry, no cupcake. And then the next day he came back like nothing. And so many people were like mad at him, adults. They're like, oh, I just don't know about him anymore, because, or how could you, like, you're not mad. And and that's a rough thing. It's hard for people to understand that it wasn't on purpose. And it's hard for people to understand that sometimes that behavior is uncontrollable. And it's hard for people to understand that even though he did that to me yesterday, he's over it today. He's not a bad person. He's not, I'm not mad at him. He's not mad at me. I'm happy he's better. You know what I mean? Like it just, and those are the things that people won't know how to understand, that if we can't start talking about it.
Exactly.
Because those are the exact people who are hidden from our view. Because the moment it gets disruptive and the moment it's uncomfortable, then everybody wants them gone, or everybody wants them removed, or if he was at a restaurant, the restaurant staff or the owner might, I feel like it wouldn't seem unreasonable for him to be removed from that situation. And understandably so, but if we can't start talking about those incidences and those kinds of behaviors and that kind of person, where are we going to go? Exactly. We're just going to keep hiding it and keep separating them from the rest of the world.
Or worse,
so those are,
if we don't learn to understand it, I think what's worse is we just try to punish it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a really scary thing that we see, you know, a lot, is that people are being punished when what they need is just patience and understanding, and the courage that you're you know, describing. That's what they need. They need people like you to be brave enough to just be there and deal with it, you know. And I think that's I mean, I really appreciate that story.
And providing the resources for those people. I think in that situation, if it had happened in a restaurant, he would have had the cops called on him. And when what he probably needed was a social worker and to come and ease him and calm him down and get him help. And, you know, and we don't have a society that does that. And we overburden our social workers like we overburden our teachers. And we, you know, and then we don't make that space to do the right thing for someone like that who really can't help it.
Yeah, and someone like him, I think probably most of the world will never understand him because he doesn't speak with words, and so since he doesn't speak with words, no one talks to him. You know, he doesn't look or dress or act like everybody else, so you know, because of that, nobody's going to talk to him, and then he has these behaviors, you know, and then but it's not all the time. It's actually very rare. But if anybody would just take the time to get to know that, you know, him specifically, he was so much fun. And I mean, it just cracked me up. Like, I really, really love that kid, you know what I mean? And I really, truly was unfazed by that whole situation just because I understood that was like, that was a bad day for him, you know? And so if we can just get to that place where, you know, and that doesn't mean everybody needs to love everybody else. You know, I don't love everybody who I work with. I don't love everybody who, you know what I mean, who I went to college with. It's not about you have to love every single person, but you have to have love for everybody, I think. You know, regardless of whether or not you love them. You have to have love in your heart. You have to have love when you walk out the door. You have to know how to, you know, understand and accept and you know, just
considerate.
Be considerate
and being thoughtful, like what you're talking about.
So I think you're right. I think it all comes down to awareness, and it's very easy to get mad at people who you know, because it's interesting, even if no one is pushing stuff off of the shelf at Target. And even if no one is sort of screaming or grabbing anybody or spitting, even if there's someone who's just stimming on the bus, right? Just like unusual movement on the bus, like maybe flapping their hands or you know, whatever. People still look at them with disgust. It's insane, you know, and it's crazy that people are so disgusted by anyone who's different in those kinds of ways. And so, you know, I think you're right. It's so hard to look at that. And a lot of my job involves going out into the community because I'm teaching them how to ride the bus. I'm teaching them how to make purchases. I'm teaching them how to become independent, hopefully, or as independent as possible. And so it's hard, especially earlier on in my career. I would look at those people. I really would want to just like say something to them, or, you know, just, I was just angry. I was just like, oh, like F that person, you know? But now that I've been able to sort of understand the world a little bit better, and I'm a little bit older and I've been doing this for a while, that's what I realize, is that some people are prejudiced and some people are mean, but I feel like the majority of people are not intentionally prejudiced. They just don't know. They don't understand. That no one ever told them. You know, how could they know?
What you're talking about is teaching people to want to understand. Because like it starts there. Understanding is it's easy to get mad and be annoyed at something you don't understand. So then you have to really ask yourself, well, do they want to understand? Well, how do you teach a person to want to understand? It's like, well, your life, everything is going to be improved once you know more, once you try to know more. And you're just going to have a better ability to relate to people in general. And I think the alternative is to just walk around scared and stupid, and we're better than that,
Yeah. And that, that's the easiest thing to do, though. That's the easiest thing for people to do, is to stay ignorant. And so I think that's why I do things the way that I do. And even compared to other teacher influencers, I think I'm still a little different, because I'm not trying to access other teachers. I'm not trying to, I do a little bit of that. I have curriculum that I can use and all of that, but my main audience is everybody who's far, far away from the educational scholarly communities, right? And so a lot of times, the way that I get attention is by being attention seeking. I post some selfies or take some videos where I'm wearing a cool outfit or something, and that's how I'm getting that attention to inspire those people, because it's easiest to stay ignorant. That's the easiest option, right? That's the option that requires zero work, zero thinking, zero change. And so, if we're not looking to those people who, because if you don't have someone in your family with a disability,
you're not going to know.
And if you don't, what's the motivation to care?
Exactly.
It's very easy to just write it off and just not think about it. So my mission is really just to bring it to the front of people's minds. And if they're following me because they think I look cool, or they like, my outfits or whatever, every time they see a post, there's that message underneath, and every time they see me, I think even if there's no words on, my picture or whatever, I think people associate me with disability. They associate me with special education and advocacy and all of that. And so even just, just being seen in that way, I think is keeping that message at the front of their minds. And that's what it's about, is people have to be interested, and they have to be motivated and inspired. And if they're not, the other option is to do nothing and to stay the same. And
you're accessing the most opportunity by casting the wide net that you're casting. And that's what I really appreciate about the strategy, because as you're saying, it's like, the default is to just be scared and stupid, but the alternative would be if you were to be exposed to something that would expand your perspective. And the nature of today's technology and people's access to it is that we can actually switch that up, because it's learned. To be scared and stupid is actually, you learn to be scared and stupid. But to be informed and to be appreciative and to be understanding, that can be learned too. And I think when people see it, when you model it the way you do, they're going to understand that. And I think most people can appreciate it. And that's why I really like what you do, your strategy with it. Hey, Stephen, we've already done another hour.
Oh, wow.
That went by quick. I'm gonna put the kids to bed. Just want to say, truly an honor. I really, really appreciate you. We definitely have to do this in real life.
And like we said the last time when it got cut off, we want to interview your ability advocates and meet up in a real location at post-pandemic and have them come on and advocate for themselves, because I think that's the most important advocacy, is when they can speak for themselves and say, like, yes, like we're okay with being Instagram influencers, and we want you to know that sometimes we have a bad day and we just need you to care. And
that's it.
So
that's what's up.
Yeah,
they will be excited to do that, I'm sure. So you let us know when.
Thank you for the time. You're so generous with your time, because round 2 is a charm. So
but also for the work you're doing, educating the community, educating us teachers that need that extra education, and we hope to see more of your work.
Yeah, well, I'm very appreciative of this project that you guys are starting up. Just because, like I said, it's we need more of this in our area, and so you let me know anytime, and you can have as much time of mine as you want.
Hey.
Thank you.
If you have made it this far, all the way to the end of our interview, we thank you so much for sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed having this conversation with Mr. Stefan. If you liked our episode, we hope that you will leave a review wherever it is you accessed your podcast. This is especially true for Apple Podcasts because the more reviews we get, the more visibility our podcast gets, and we can draw in some more listeners. Also, tell your friends about us, and hopefully they'll enjoy listening in too. Thank you so much again.